Hey, hello, happy Thursday. This is Jack Tubbs with the J Team on Pt.1 in Surprise, Arizona, coming to you on this warm Thursday here in the Valley in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, I want to share a little bit of real estate terminology with you today. Probably most of this is going to be obvious and I'm just going to be preaching to the choir, but nonetheless, it just helps you have a better understanding of how a real estate transaction works if you understand the function of the people that are involved. First person I'm going to start with is going to be the buyer's agent or buyer's broker. They are hired or contracted by the person who's going to purchase the real estate on the purchase side of the transaction to help facilitate that transaction until it's closed. He's going to wear many hats throughout this whole process. And first off, he's going to be the buyer's representative in the transaction. He's going to want to help the buyer negotiate. He's going to advise the buyer. He's going to bring comparable sold properties to the buyer so they can craft out a perfect purchase price or purchase limit, especially in this real estate market. Where they want to go, work with their lender to make sure that they are qualified to buy the property, that they can meet all the obligations such as HOAs, property taxes, all the other things that are involved with the buyer's payment, to make sure that they're falling within the limits of what the lender knows that will be approved so that they can close the purchase transaction. He's also going to make sure that he goes over the title work with the purchaser, that he's going to be the liaison between the title escrow company and the lender. We're kind of working with all three of those entities together along with the purchaser, advising them where things stand once the offer is accepted. Be there for all inspections, if needs so, be there for the appraisal, just to facilitate and help guide and advise everything on the purchase side of the transaction to make sure that it goes smoothly, it goes timely, to make sure all paperwork is turned in, all paperwork is signed properly, all I's are dotted, T's are crossed, etc., so that it's a very smooth transaction. That most buyers agents will have a checklist of things that need to be done to assure a timely, smooth transaction. Now, on the other side of the transaction, we have the seller's agent or the listing agent. Now, the seller's agent, 99% of the time, is also the agent that lists the property. The one who's put the property on the market, he's put it on the MLS. He's also the one who or she has marketed the properties to buyers so that it gets the most attention that it possibly can, that it can be seen on multiple platforms across the internet, across newspapers, and also just the most famous part of marketing for selling a home is making sure that sign gets put out front so that anybody who drives by knows that that house is for sale. This is also the person that will handle the seller side of the transaction, making sure that preliminary title work has already been applied for, making sure that there are no hidden liens or any other blemishes on the title that have to be taken care of prior to closing the sales transaction or closing the transaction, so that the property can be conveyed from the seller to the buyer. This is also the person that can be there for inspections, for appraisals if need be. This is the person who will hold open houses and have other marketing events to make sure that this property is seen on its broadest platform, having brokers opens, etc., and once again representing the seller throughout the entire transaction, keeping them abreast of what's going on, what stages of the transaction we are, making sure that they know what to expect as far as the net is going to be, working with the title company, working with the buyer's agent, working with all those entities and the escrow company, working together seamlessly, making sure that this transaction moves forward at its fastest and best pace. So those are the two agents that are involved excuse me, in the transaction itself. One represents the buyer, one represents the seller. Now, sometimes we have what's called a sub-agent. And the sub-agent owns the same fiduciary duties to the agent's customers as the agent does, but sub-agency usually arises when a cooperating sales associate from another brokerage who is not the buyer's agent shows the property to a buyer. The sub-agent works with the buyer to show the property, but owes the fiduciary duties of the listing broker and the seller. In other words, a sub-agent will always be a sub-agent of the listing agent or the listing broker. And a buyer is also expected to receive the same treatment from a subagent as he is a buyer's agent. Now we have a disclosed dual agent. Now this is, especially here in Arizona, this is a very serious agency to take on for any real estate broker or any real estate agent. In other words, this agent is working for both the seller and the buyer, and it's usually the listing agent is contacted by a buyer. The buyer decides to buy, and he wants to use the agent that listed the property, and he's representing both the buyer and the agent. Now, one of the things that I want to realize is that way back when, up until about 1983, 84, it didn't matter whether you brought the buyer to the transaction or you listed the property and you were representing the seller transaction. Real estate agents were always working for the seller. And in the early 80s, a lot of buyers didn't feel that they had adequate representation. So then we had what was called declared agency or designated agency, where an agent working for the buyer had to say, I'm the buyer's agent. And then, of course, the listing agent had to say, I'm working for the seller. And they had to designate which side of the transaction they were working on. Well, then we had a problem because some listing agents would find the buyer for the transaction. So then they became a dual agent, and they had to declare that. And there are a whole bunch of steps to being a dual agent, okay? And then in the state of Arizona, we have what's called, they have to agree to be what they call limited representation, because they feel that an agent cannot adequately, truly, fully represent both the buyer and the seller without leaning one way or the other. So they feel that it's a limited representation. Well, in other states, it's called being a designated dual agency. And there's a whole bunch of steps, as I said. If no information can be passed from the agent from the seller to the buyer, or the buyer to the seller, without getting permission from either party to share that information, so that they understand, no, we don't want the buyer to know that, no, we don't want the seller to know that, and there are other steps that they have to go through as they go through the entire process of title work, etc., etc., etc. But it has to be declared, and a dual agent is an agent that is going to represent both the seller and the buyer in the transaction. Hey, that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit more about agency, about some of the real estate terminology that is used in a transaction, so you have a better understanding of it. And if I can help you with anything in a real estate transaction, if you have any questions that need to be answered, please don't hesitate to call. You can reach me directly at 248-330-7972. That's 248-330-7972. Or you can email me, Jack at the J team, and that's THE, the letter J, the word team, .house. So that's Jack at the JTeam.house. Or you can call the office, talk to my team members at 623-252-4061. Hey, this is Jack Tubbs of the J Team at Realty.1 from Surprise, Arizona, wishing you a fantastic warm Thursday, and I'll be back tomorrow with a little bit more about what's going on in the Phoenix real estate market.